everybody. I am beyond thrilled to be back here and doing some art journaling. If you've been a subscriber to my YouTube channel for long, you'll know that I used to teach an art journaling class that was every other week, or basically 2 Sundays out of each month. And at the end of last year, one of our local stores closed, and I've kind of been, I don't know, doing a little soul searching through the first half of 2017, and we just moved into a beautiful new house, 2-story house, and I have set up a really great little art area in our house where we're going to be inviting some of my beautiful friends from the art journaling group over to start art journaling back up. So that also gives me the opportunity to record some new videos for you. So here I am. That's where we are. There's a really long pause in there, but it was totally worth the wait because I'm back and I had a break and I have fresh ideas and it's exciting and I'm glad to be here. So welcome back. I started this project with a piece of Canson watercolor paper, and it's 9 inches tall by 12 inches wide. And then I covered it with Liquitex gesso. I always love to prep my surface with gesso, so I did that. And then I got out some Blick heavy gesso and a new 7-dot studio stencil that I designed, and I applied that heavy gesso through the stencil. And it's kind of like this triangle fade, so the triangles are really large towards the top and they're kind of in a circle or like a hexagon shape, and then they cascade down, and the further they get down the stencil, then the smaller they get, and it's a really cool stencil. So I applied some heavy gesso through that, and then while the gesso is still wet, I'm using some Prima Finnabair art stones to add some like really cool sandy texture to the background. So I have found over these last few years doing art journaling and projects and things like that, I really love working in the background. And I don't always have a lot of embellishing going on top of the background. But it's fine. My backgrounds sing, and they have sometimes lots of color, sometimes lots of texture, sometimes both. Generally, I keep a bit of white space around. It makes me happy. I love background work. It's my favorite. So welcome to art journaling with great backgrounds. I'm always glad to have you here. After I had those art stones embedded, I used the really fine one. After I had the art stones embedded into the gesso while it was still wet, and because it was heavy, then it sort of acted as an adhesive. So it got set inside there, and then I heat set everything so it was nice and dry. Then I covered my background with a layer of water, and I got out the Deco Art Media fluid acrylics, and the colors and links of supplies will be listed specifically in my blog post and in the description box of this YouTube video. So put down some water, because then I'm playing with fluid acrylics and they move really well in water and they can turn into this sort of really cool watercolory effect. And then if you want them darker, like I did, then you just go back in with a little bit more color and add that in. And these paints are really, really amazing because they move so much in the water that they replicate or mimic watercolors, but they're really vivid and intense like acrylics. So they're really fun to play with, and they create really nice drippy effects, and they have bold, create really bold, intense backgrounds. I did also keep a wet brush close by to kind of help them move around a little bit. And sometimes the paint will kind of blend down into the recesses, and that's a pretty cool technique too. So after everything dried, I decided I wanted to highlight that, and I had all this fantastic texture from the gesso through the stencil and then adding the art stones in. So I pulled back out my heavy gesso, and I am now highlighting all that texture by rubbing the gesso onto it with my finger. And it's so simple, so easy to do. It's awesome. It's just really, really awesome. Now, you could use a palette knife, and I will use a palette knife in a little bit just to show you the difference. But a palette knife doesn't have as much control and isn't as soft as your finger. So a palette knife almost always kind of like blobs down some gesso almost always, no matter kind of what you do in your finger, it's easier to move the gesso around and kind of keep it a little bit thinner. I definitely suggest to try both ways because you may like one better than the other, or you might like it differently than I do. I mean, it's total personal preference. So I did let that dry, and then I decided to go in and sort of add some circles here. This is where I'm getting more into the embellishing style or technique, and I'm sort of layering stuff up here. And so I used some gesso, and I created these sort of dots, this dot pattern coming in, and I find myself creating this sort of a pattern, a lot, whether it's dots or it's spots, stripes. It could be plus signs or X's or scribbles or whatever. But I really like where there's sort of a large group anchored to the side of a page or the bottom of a page, and then it kind of fades in. I really like that. It creates great movement for me, and it creates movement from outside of my frame to the inside of my project. So I really enjoy that. I did just use the palette knife like I mentioned, and then I made my, gosh, I'm saying a lot. I apologize about that. Then I used some of the gesso that was left over and intensified those circles because as they dried, they kind of diluted out a little bit and faded into the background. And then I've got out a Stabilo Marksall, and I love this pencil because it creates these really grungy effects, and we have so much insane texture happening on this art journal page that Stabilo is really like, it's kind of having a hard time, but it's really getting caught by the texture, and then I'm adding some water, and it's turning grungy, and it's kind of seeping into the recesses of the texture, and it's just really unique and different. And I love it. I love it so much. It's such a cool thing. And then it adds a little bit of grunginess, a little bit of darkness. It doesn't stay too dark. It's such a great contrast to everything that's going on. And I always love a bit of white space and some sort of black, whether it's stamping or it's mark making or it's kind of grunging up the edge like that. And it just makes me so, so happy. Here I am going in with some 1-inch masking tape, and at this point I didn't have the finished project in mind yet. I was just doing things that were making me happy. So one of those things is masking tape and Stabilo together. I do love Stabilo in the background and on papers and things like that, but I really love Stabilo on masking tape. Masking tape is so unique because it has this like funky kind of funky kind of plastic finish to it. And it's a really, really, really neat, what do I say? Like a really neat underlayer. Because when you start layering things on top of it, they all react differently, especially some water-soluble products like a Stabilo, because it acts as a resist. So then I scribbled some Stabilo, and then with my wet paintbrush, I activated that. And I picked a little bit of it up because it was a little bit too dark, but then I let it dry, or I heated it dry too, and it sort of creates these really cool, weird puddles that have resisted the tape, and it just dries on top. And the thing about Stabilo is that it will always remain water reactive unless you mix it with gesso or spray it with a fixative. So that's really cool too. And you can see in the detailed shots at the beginning and the end of the video just how cool that masking tape and the Stabilo are together. I love it. It is so, so cool. So I added a strip coming in from the left side towards the bottom, and then I always need, for me, aesthetically, I always need a contrast. So then I went back, I went up to the top right corner where I'd kind of been playing with those white dots, and I added a little piece of tape up there too. Now, the two colors that I used in my background are a teal and a magenta, and then where they overlapped, then they created this really beautiful purple color. And I've been playing with these birds on a wire chipboard pieces from Wow Studio a lot lately, and kind of just trying them on different projects and figuring out what's happening with them and kind of some of the things I can do with them because it's such a cool shape. So I decided I would add it to this art journal page. And then going back to the colors, teal and magenta, I needed something that was going to really set those birds off the page. So I decided to get out Night. It's a heavy body acrylic paint by Dina Wakely for Ranger Ink, Dina Wakely Media. And I created this sort of little kind of cloudy area where I was going to put my birds, and it ends up being on top of that beautiful masking tape that we've been playing with. Then I cover my birds in heavy gesso, and I use my fingers a lot. I've had a lot of new subscribers to my YouTube channel, so thank you so much for coming over. And of course, this goes out to my regulars too, who probably already know this. I use my fingers a lot in my work, and I feel like I have better connection with the artwork that I'm creating, and then the intent that I'm putting forward, and I have better control. Like I can feel it better than if I was going to do everything with a paintbrush or a palette knife. So I'm not saying it's for everybody, but if you haven't tried yet, try using your fingers some. That's what I did, how I applied the gesso to the chipboard, and I was able to keep it sort of thick, and it has a little bit of texture, which is a really great complement to all the texture we played with in the background. Then I glued the birds down with some heavy gel medium in a matte version, and now I have some of that leftover night, and I decided to do some spots to sort of help that cloudy area blend in. And I added some on the white circles a little bit, spread that color across the page because it's very important. I don't very often have like just one color or have one color in one place. I like to complement it in smaller ways throughout the page, and that's what I did with the night. And then I dried everything so it was ready to go, and I got out my white Sharpie paint pen, water-based, and I added some really cool dots on top of this navy layer. So there's lots of layers happening. There's gesso, and then there's gesso through a stencil, and there's paint, and there's masking tape, and there's Stabilo, and there's gesso, and there's heavy body paint, and there's chipboard, and it's really, really cool. So thank you so much for joining me. I am really excited to be back doing art journaling. Check out what else is happening on my channel. I've been doing iCads, which is a daily little mixed media sort of art challenge. And I'm always glad to have you. Thanks for joining me. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss anything, and I'll see you again soon. Thank you.